and welcome to Insight into Ocular Melanoma. Today we have two special guests for you. We have Kevin, an ocular melanoma patient, and Barbara with Pattern.org. Today we're going to talk about a special project that you might want to be involved in if you've not had your eye treated. When I was diagnosed 10 years ago, biopsies were not something that were routinely done. They've since found that they're perfectly safe and they do not increase your risk of metastasis. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about why biopsies are important and how your biopsy could help with research. I'd like to introduce Kevin to you now.
Well, hi, I'm Kevin in Philadelphia, and I'd been under observation for 15 years at Wills Eye Hospital for a small pigment area on my iris, on the front of the eye. And so in May 1st, 2019, I was in for my annual observation, and the whole appointment went a lot slower. And the doctor looked up and said, "I think you know what I'm about to tell you." So after 15 years, I got my diagnosis of ocular melanoma, where he had observed that there were some brown cells that were now creeping over into the white part of the eye, or migrating. So we had to decide on some specific radiation therapy, but he told me that they would biopsy it for one genetic test and to take a look at the cells, and then we'd go to the radiation. In the month that followed that original diagnosis, I happened to be at the world's largest cancer meeting in Chicago, where I met Melody. And she was there with other patients as well at the ASCO meeting. And she informed me about genetic testing for an individual case, that there were available next generation sequencing where 7 genes of interest could be profiled in the tumor cells, and that would help to predict the course of the disease after initial therapy, whether or not it might spread to other organs. And so I had the genetic testing, I had the extra biopsy at Wills Eye Hospital when I had my initial biopsy, all in the same procedure. It only added 5 minutes, and we had those cells flown to Phoenix to a company called Castle Bioscience, and they did the genetic test and reported it back to my doctors. There is another genetics testing company, Melody, is it Impact Genetics?
Yes, Impact.
And I believe they're in Toronto. So there are now 2 commercial companies that have these types of tests available to patients and their doctors to determine what the course of the disease will be after initial therapy. What I didn't find out about until probably 5 or 6 months later, last fall of 2019, when I was at the Broad Institute, was Pattern.org. And this is another potential area to have biopsy material from your eye tumor sent to the Broad Institute, which is a foundation, a nonprofit organization, fully devoted to cancer research. And what they're trying to do is build a tumor bank of all these different rare tumors, including ocular melanoma. And so one extra biopsy could have been taken from my eye tumor and sent off to through Pattern.org, that you'll hear about in a moment, and contributed to the research efforts at the Broad Institute. So I'm very interested in furthering this potential collaboration. And I just wanted to say that I would encourage any patient or family member facing biopsy or possibly removal of the tumor in the eye to talk to their doctors first before that's happened, and consider all these aspects of genetic testing and potential donation of eye tumor material. So that's it from me, and I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Van Hare, and I'm with the Rare Cancer Research Foundation, and we have an initiative called Pattern.org that I'd like to talk to you about today. Thank you, Kevin and Melody, for inviting me to be here today. I'd like to talk to you about, just for a few minutes, about the importance of tissue donation and how you can contribute to research through Pattern.org. So one of the key issues in advancing research for rare cancers, such as ocular melanoma, which coincidentally, our founder of the Rare Cancer Research Foundation is an OM patient and survivor, is that ocular melanoma is a fairly rare cancer, and as a result, limited patients many times present. There are few patients at a single institution. Some institutions may store the tissue, but they may not actually utilize it for research. Other researchers may not be given access to that tissue. Also, a lot of times models aren't made from the tissue, and the importance of a model is that it allows a living organism where different genetic studies can be done as well as therapeutic testing can be done. So there's a real need for ocular melanoma and other rare cancers to have these model systems, and also very important for those models and the associated data to be put in what's called the public domain, so that other researchers worldwide have access to that so they can further their studies and learn more about the disease, to learn about new therapies as well as search for the cure. So ocular melanoma patients can actually then become partners in research through tissue donation to help solve all of these issues. These disease models, which I referenced earlier, enable scientists to better understand the biology of the disease, test and identify ways to better diagnose and potentially prevent disease, as well as to test and identify new therapies and potentially a cure. So the Rare Cancer Research Foundation launched Pattern.org about four years ago to enable patients to directly donate their tumor tissue and medical data to high impact research. And therefore, we're allowing patients to bridge the gap between the patients themselves and scientists, allowing then the patients to actually be partners in the research. And how it works, if a patient is going to have a biopsy or potentially surgery, they can go to Pattern.org, fill in a few basic information about themselves, and then they'll be connected to an applicable research study. They can, after they read through the information about the study, they can go ahead and consent online. And then after they do that, we'll send them a medical release form for their medical records at whatever institution where they're having the biopsy or surgery. Once a patient does consent, then that's really all the patient has to do. We will then step in and coordinate with the surgeon or oncologist and coordinate the collection of the tissue as well as any data transfer. Creation of these living models, genomic studies, and/or therapeutic discoveries. And what are the examples of the type of living models that I'm talking about, and why are they important? One of the most common kind of living models are cell lines, which is a group of cells that are basically taken from a tumor, and they grow them in the lab so that they will basically live on immortally or indefinitely in the laboratory. An organoid is similar to a cell line, but it's a three-dimensional structure instead of a two-dimensional structure such as a cell line. And both of those are very widely used models that are used to study the biology of cancer and to test new therapies. One of the challenges with the rare cancers is there aren't many cell lines or organoids for rare cancers such as ocular melanoma. So hence, we partner with patients so that they can donate excess tissue from a surgery or biopsy so that these living models can be created. Furthermore, besides the fact that there aren't many living models, for the few models that do exist for ocular melanoma, very few are available in the public domain. And in case you don't know what that means by the public domain is, this allows those models as well as associated data associated with them to be available to virtually any researcher in the world. And why should you consider donating excess tissue through Pattern.org? Number one, since ocular melanoma is a rare cancer, limited patients usually are seen at any single institution. Through Pattern.org, we can collect the tissue through any institution in the continental US that you may be seen at. Some institutions don't have research facilities, so they actually toss any tissues that aren't needed for the patient care. And that is one way in which we can collect the tissue, keep it from being tossed or stored and not used in a facility. As mentioned, stored tissue may not always be fully utilized. So in the case of ocular melanoma through Pattern.org, we will send it to an institution where it will be utilized for research. One of the key issues that researchers have is access to tumor tissue. So if a patient decides to consent, then we'll collect it and send it to researchers that we know will use it and that may not have had the ability to collect it through their own academic institution. As mentioned, there are lack of robust models out there, and the donated tissue will be utilized to create models such as the cell lines and organoids. And the open source models and data, anything that's created from tissue that is delivered through pattern.org, those will be placed in the public domain. Of course, they'll be de-identified so that the researchers and the public won't know who it is that donated the tissue, but the results from those tissues will be shared. One of the key points of donating through Pattern is that we collect fresh tissue. So that means that time of the biopsy or the surgical resection is when we would collect the tissue. We'll only collect excess tissue, meaning any tissue that's needed for patient care that your doctor or team of doctors need. If there's a limited amount and there's not enough to share with us, that is fine. We want to make sure that the patient is taken care of first, so we'll only collect when there's excess tissue available. It will not affect any clinical care of the patient. This is a general research project and will not have any impact on the care that you would receive. We ask for certain sample sizes, but many times, particularly with ocular melanoma, we can use a little smaller piece of tissue, and we would coordinate with your doctor to see if there's enough tissue available. As well as tissue can be taken from a primary tumor in the eye, or if it is a metastatic case, we can also collect that tissue. One of the key points is that a patient, if they're interested, must consent prior to their surgery. We ask that they do it a week in advance if possible. That just gives us the time to coordinate with the surgeon and anyone else there at the hospital to make sure that we can get a kit to arrive in time and that everybody has agreed at the institution that they will release the tissue to us. As mentioned, this is for general research only. No results are actually returned to the patient. The lab does not know who the patient is. And again, this is for general research to help the general ocular melanoma community. So unfortunately, we cannot return any of the learnings back to the patient. Your privacy is protected. Everything is de-identified, and the data is stored on an encrypted, HIPAA-compliant server with restricted access. And if a patient decides at some point that they want to revoke their consent, they can do so at any time. All the details are on pattern.org, but glad to review that with anyone if they'd like to contact me, and I'll provide my contact information at the end of the slides. Pattern does all the coordination with the surgeon or the oncologist in the hospital. It's wonderful if a patient wants to mention the opportunity to their surgeon, but it is not necessary. We'll handle that for them. And there is no cost to the patient to participate in this research. Again, I'm Barbara Van Heer with pattern.org. If someone is interested in pursuing, they can just go to pattern.org. There's information on the site. There's also a chat box on the site if they want to chat with us, or you can reach out to me directly at barbara@pattern.org, PATTERN.org, at any time with any questions or concerns. And in case anyone's interested as to why we use the name pattern.org, is the labs that we're working with and the researchers are looking for patterns in the cancer. And so that's how pattern.org was created.
Barbara, that was great. Thanks for that great presentation. And I just wanted to again appeal to patients and their families before they go for a biopsy with ocular melanoma at their hospital, that they consider pattern.org. Go to the website, you can read about it. I wish I had known about it earlier because I wasn't able to participate, but it's easy to enroll. I've looked at the website. And then, as Barbara said, once you register with them with a little bit of information, pattern.org will contact your surgeon and coordinate everything. It's painless. Biopsies occur under anesthesia. It's one extra, piece of tissue that's removed. You don't feel it, and you're helping science. And more importantly, you're helping all the other patients around the world to benefit in the future from this type of research. Again, it's not identifying you, it's all pooled together with other patients and their donations so that these research institutions can try to find effective therapies for primary and metastatic disease of ocular melanoma. So please consider making this gift or donation. Like I said, it doesn't hurt, but it sure does help the field. And thanks.
Barbara, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
What if somebody like me has already had their tumor treated, and so there's no eye tissue left, but we might get metastatic disease down the road? How can they use metastatic tissue?
Absolutely. Similar to a primary tumor, if you know you have metastatic disease and you're going in for a biopsy or a surgery, then you can go to pattern.org and register and consent the same way. So definitely interested. Researchers need to solve the metastatic disease as well as the primary disease.
And if they were to have their eye enucleated and there's tissue there, how do you go about handling that since it's not a biopsy?
Same way, if the eye is enucleated, a sample of the tissue from inside the eye would be sent through Pattern to the research laboratory. And they would attempt to create a model from that.
And that happens the day of surgery. When they take the eye out and the pathologist first gets it, they're going to quickly send off a fresh sample with pattern.org?
Exactly.
Okay. It's got to be fresh. Yep.
It's got to be fresh. And the reason why these studies need the fresh tissue is in order to make a living model, you have to have living tissue.
Yep.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. We hope that we're spreading some good information. And, people ask, how can they be an advocate for ocular melanoma? And right here is a really good way. It doesn't take any time or effort. You just sign a consent form and the rest is left up to your doctors and pattern.org.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Insight into Ocular Melanoma.